Have you ever noticed how exhausting it is to constantly look over your shoulder, even when you're standing in a perfectly quiet room? For a long time, self-doubt isn't just a thought in your head. It becomes a physical habit. You brace your shoulders, you hold your breath, and you wait for the other shoe to drop. You learn to treat yourself like a difficult project that needs constant management, rather than a human being who needs care. We think that if we criticize ourselves first, it won't hurt as much when the world does it. But that invisible armor doesn't actually keep the world out. It just keeps you locked inside, isolated from your own life. You realize you've been running a marathon with no finish line, trying to outrun a shadow that belongs to you. Think about how early you started building this suit of armor. Maybe it started so long ago that you don't even remember what it feels like to walk through the world without it. You built it piece by piece, heavy plate by heavy plate. Every time someone misunderstood your intentions, every time you felt rejected, and every time you were made to feel like you were just a little too much or never quite enough. You told yourself that if you remained perfectly guarded, if you anticipated every single criticism before it could be launched at you, you would be safe. It felt like common sense back then. It felt like survival. But nobody tells us that armor works both ways. Yes, it shields you from the unexpected blows, but it also keeps out the warmth. It keeps out the light. It prevents you from feeling the soft, ordinary moments of connection that make life feel worth living. When you are wearing a heavy, iron guard around your heart, even a kind word from a friend feels like a threat, because you instantly wonder what they want from you, or how long it will take before they change their mind. You become a prisoner of your own defense system, constantly scanning the horizon for danger, unable to sit down, unable to rest, and unable to enjoy the very life you are trying so hard to protect. It is a lonely way to live, standing watch over your own vulnerabilities every single second of the day. You become your own toughest warden. You watch the way you speak, the way you sit, the way you laugh, always wondering if you are doing it right, always tracking the expressions on other people's faces to see if you are still welcome in the room. You become hyper-aware of every shift in the air, every pause in a conversation, every slight change in someone's tone. And the moment you detect even a tiny ripple of discomfort, you pull the visor down. You retreat back into the cold, familiar darkness of your own self-criticism, telling yourself, "See? I knew I shouldn't have opened up. I knew I wasn't cut out for this." But the truth is, you cannot heal a heart that you are constantly hiding. You cannot build a safe place within yourself if you are treating your core being as something dangerous that needs to be locked away and guarded. The armor doesn't fix the doubt. It just institutionalizes it. It tells your nervous system every single morning that you are in a war zone, even when you are just sitting by the window, holding a warm cup of tea. It keeps your pulse high and your heart tight. Taking off that armor feels terrifying because it has been your home for so long. Without it, you feel exposed, raw, and completely unprotected against the elements of life. But true emotional safety doesn't come from being invulnerable. It comes from knowing that even if you do get hurt, even if you get rejected, even if you make a mistake that feels humiliating in the moment, you will be there to catch yourself. It means realizing that the heavy walls you built to survive the past are the exact same walls preventing you from living in the present. You don't have to carry the weight of that heavy iron anymore. It is okay to grow tired of fighting a battle that ended years ago. It is okay to finally put the shield down, take a deep, unrestricted breath, and let yourself just be seen, most of all, by you. Think about the last time you had a great idea or felt a sudden burst of genuine excitement. What happened next? If you are used to self-doubt, that spark was probably met with an immediate, icy wave of hesitation. You wonder if you're qualified, if you're misreading the situation, or if you're just setting yourself up for failure. We spend hours replaying a conversation we had 3 days ago, dissecting a single sentence we said to a colleague, or looking at a text message draft as if it's a legal contract. This constant second-guessing is incredibly draining. It creates a state of internal static where you can't hear your own intuition anymore. You become a stranger to your own preferences, constantly looking to external cues to tell you how to feel, what to choose, and who to be. We don't often realize the sheer volume of life that gets lost in the gap between our first instinct and our second guess. That gap is where your joy goes to die. It is where your creativity gets quieted down before it can even make a sound. Think of all the times you wanted to wear something a little brighter, speak up during a meeting, or tell someone that you deeply cared about them, only to let the second guess talk you out of it. You tell yourself you are just being cautious, or that you are being smart and practical. But if we are being completely honest with ourselves, it isn't caution. It is a slow, quiet betrayal of your own truth. You are telling your inner self that its first, most authentic response is fundamentally broken and cannot be trusted. This habit turns your mind into a crowded room full of conflicting opinions, even when you are completely alone. You sit on the couch in the evening, but your mind is still at work, or back in high school, or wandering through an old argument, rewriting history. Why did I say it that way? Why didn't I notice their expression change? Did I sound foolish? You treat your past self like a criminal under interrogation, shining a harsh, unforgiving light on every minor stumble. You look for patterns of failure where there are only patterns of being human. And while you are busy auditing your past or trying to bulletproof your future, the actual present moment passes by completely unnoticed. You miss the warmth of the sun coming through the window, the taste of your food, and the simple peace of just being alive right now. The truest cost of this second guessing is that it makes you invisible to yourself. When you constantly doubt your own perceptions, you start needing everyone else to agree with you before you can feel okay. If someone doesn't reply to a message right away, you assume you did something wrong. If someone looks slightly tired, you wonder if they are upset with you. You spend an immense amount of emotional currency trying to read the unsaid thoughts of others, trying to adapt, shape-shift, and mold yourself into whatever version you think will keep the peace. You become an expert at anticipating what everyone else needs, while your own heart sits in the corner, growing quieter and more neglected by the day. You forget what you actually like, what actually brings you comfort, and what your own unedited voice sounds like. It is a deeply painful way to live, because it means you are never truly standing on solid ground. Your sense of security becomes entirely dependent on the fluctuating moods, opinions, and reactions of the people around you. You are building your foundation on shifting sand. Every time you change your mind to please someone else, or every time you suppress a boundary because you are afraid of the friction it might cause, you chip away at your internal trust. You are sending a message deep into your own system that says, everyone else is smarter, everyone else is safer, and everyone else knows better than me. But they don't. They are just figuring it out as they go, too. It is time to stop treating your own heart like an unreliable witness and start recognizing that your instincts have value. Your voice matters, and your first guess is worthy of being heard. We often talk about safety as something external, a locked door, a stable job, or a person who promises never to leave. But the most profound safety is entirely internal. It is the quiet understanding that no matter what happens out there, you will not abandon yourself in here. When you lack that internal anchor, every minor setback feels like an eviction notice. A small mistake at work doesn't just mean a project needs fixing. It feels like proof that you don't belong in the room. Building an inner safe place means shifting your foundation. It means creating a space within your own mind where you are allowed to stumble without fear of being condemned by your own inner voice. It's about transforming your mind from a courtroom into a home. Think about what it really means to live inside a home versus a courtroom. In a courtroom, every single thing you do is evidence. Every word you utter is weighed, tracked, and used to build a case against you. If you drop a glass, it's proof that you are clumsy. If you miss a deadline, it's proof that you are lazy. If you feel sad on a beautiful day, it's proof that you are ungrateful. When your mind is structured this way, you are always on trial, always exhausted, and always terrified of the verdict. But a home is completely different. In a home, if you drop a glass, you just sweep up the pieces. If you have a bad day, you pull the blankets up and try again tomorrow. A home is a place where your imperfections don't threaten your right to belong. Many of us have spent years building a beautifully manicured exterior, while the foundation inside is completely hollow. We think that if we can just accumulate enough external approval, we will finally feel secure. We chase titles, validation, and praise, hoping these things will patch up the cracks in our self-worth. But external safety is a fragile illusion. A company can restructure, A relationship can end, and opinions can change in a single afternoon. If your safety is tied to things outside of your control, you will always live with a low-grade sense of panic. Architecture of the self requires you to look inward and ask, when everything else falls away, who is left to hold me? To build an inner safe place, you have to intentionally change the blueprint of how you talk to yourself when you are hurting. It starts in the quiet, messy moments when things don't go according to plan. It's the moment you get a piece of difficult feedback, or the moment you realize you made an embarrassing error. Instead of immediately joining the chorus of criticism, building safety means stopping, taking a deep breath, and saying to yourself, "This is hard right now, but I am still on your side." It is the practice of becoming your own fiercest protector rather than your own harshest critic. It is making a pact with yourself that no matter how loud the storm gets on the outside, the walls of your inner sanctuary will hold. This internal architecture isn't built out of grand, sweeping gestures. It is built out of small bricks of daily kindness. It is built when you choose to acknowledge your tiredness instead of shaming yourself for not doing more. It is built when you let yourself feel a difficult emotion without demanding that it make sense or go away immediately. Over time, these small choices accumulate. They create a solid, unshakable floor beneath your feet. You begin to realize that you don't need to be perfect to be safe. You don't need to have everything figured out to deserve a place to rest. You learn to trust that you can handle the discomfort of growth, the pain of grief, and the uncertainty of change, because you have finally built a structure inside that can weather any season. You are no longer homeless in your own life. You have built a sanctuary within. To understand why we doubt ourselves so deeply, we have to look at the parts of ourselves we've tried to hide away. The Swiss psychologist Carl Jung once observed, "Thinking is difficult. That's why most people judge." When we apply that to our inner world, we realize how often we judge our own feelings instead of taking the time to understand them. We judge our anxiety, we judge our sadness, and we judge our slow progress. But those feelings aren't defects. They are messengers. That intense self-doubt you feel might just be a protective mechanism that learned somewhere along the way that staying small was the only way to stay out of trouble. When you stop judging those anxious parts of yourself and start listening to them, the internal warfare begins to quiet down. Think about the parts of your history that you are most ashamed of. The moments you spoke out of anger, the times you felt overwhelming envy, or the days you were so paralyzed by fear that you simply shut down. For years, you might have treated these hidden pieces like a dark room you never want to open. You lock the door, pull the curtains, and pretend that what is inside doesn't exist. You think that if you acknowledge your weaknesses, your anger, or your deep sense of inadequacy, those feelings will somehow consume you. But the things we try to bury don't disappear. They just wait in the dark, gathering strength, leaking out into our daily lives as that quiet, persistent voice of self-doubt that whispers you are a fraud. It takes an immense amount of daily energy to keep your own shadow locked away. It is like trying to hold an inflatable ball underwater. Your muscles are constantly tense. Your focus is entirely consumed by the effort, and you are always just one slip away from everything bursting to the surface. We judge ourselves because judging is fast, simple, and gives us a false sense of control. It is much easier to say, "I am weak for feeling this way," than it is to sit down on the floor, look at your pain in the face, and ask, "Where does this hurt? And what do you need from me?" But when you choose the harder path of understanding, you discover that the shadow you were so afraid of isn't a monster at all. It is just a wounded, younger part of you that was left behind. That part of you that panics when someone doesn't text back right away. That isn't a defect. It's a part of you that remembers what it felt like to be left alone when you were small. That part of you that procrastinates and avoids taking risks. That isn't laziness. It's a part of you trying to shield you from the crushing weight of failure. When you change your perspective and see these difficult emotions through the lens of protection rather than failure, everything changes. You stop fighting yourself. You realize that you don't need to exile your shadow to be healed. You need to bring it into the light. You need to look at your most fragile, messy pieces and welcome them back into the fold of who you are. Meeting your shadow means standing in the quiet corners of your mind and declaring a truce. It means looking at your anxiety, your grief, and your unspoken longings and saying, "I see you. I know you are tired, and you don't have to hide from me anymore." When you finally extend this simple, unconditional compassion to the parts of yourself you used to hate, the heavy burden of self-doubt begins to lift. You no longer have to live in fear of being found out, because you have already seen the worst of your own shadows and chosen to meet them with kindness. You become whole, integrated, and finally, genuinely safe within your own skin. Many of us are waiting to arrive at some idealized, flawless version of ourselves before we allow ourselves to feel secure. We think, once I am completely confident, once I have no anxieties, once I achieve this specific milestone, then I will finally trust myself. But that version of you does not exist, and chasing it only deepens the doubt. The truth is, healing isn't about erasing your vulnerabilities. It's about changing your relationship with them. You can feel uncertain and still take the next step. You can feel nervous and still be entirely capable. Safety doesn't mean the absence of fear. It means knowing that fear is just a passing weather pattern, not the sky itself. Think about how much of your life you have put on hold while waiting for this perfect version to arrive. You tell yourself that you will apply for that dream role once you finally feel 100% qualified. You tell yourself you will open your heart to a new connection once you have completely resolved all your old baggage. You wait and you wait, standing on the sidelines of your own existence, watching other people move forward, make mistakes, and grow, while you remain frozen in preparation. We treat our lives like a dress rehearsal, believing that the real performance can only begin once we have scrubbed away every single flaw. But while you are waiting to become flawless, the years are quietly passing you by. This obsession with perfection is just self-doubt, wearing a more sophisticated mask. It masquerades as self-improvement, but it functions as a barrier to keep you from ever risking exposure. It forces you to set standards for yourself that no human being could ever actually meet. And then it punishes you for failing to reach them. Every time you have a bad day, or every time you experience a momentary wave of insecurity, the voice of doubt uses it as evidence that you aren't ready yet, that you need to do more work, read more books, or fix another part of yourself. It is an endless, exhausting loop because the finish line keeps moving. The moment you achieve one goal, the doubt simply creates a new condition you must meet before you can finally feel safe. True emotional freedom begins when you stop negotiating with this impossible standard and accept the beauty of your own messy reality. You have to realize that the people you admire, the ones who seem to walk through the world with such ease and confidence, aren't flawless either. They aren't living without fear, doubt, or confusion. The only difference is that they have stopped letting their flaws disqualify them from participating in their own lives. They have learned to carry their anxieties with them, rather than waiting for the anxiety to disappear completely before they move. They know that you can be a masterpiece and a work in progress at the exact same time. It is time to let go of the heavy burden of trying to be a finished product. You are allowed to be a person who is still figuring things out. You are allowed to have days where you feel entirely confident, followed immediately by days where you feel completely lost. This fluctuation doesn't mean your healing is failing. It just means you are alive. When you give up the myth of the perfect version, you finally give yourself permission to inhabit the life you actually have right now. You can sit down in your own skin, with all your scars, your questions, and your untied ends, and realize that you are already enough. You don't need to be cured of your humanity to be worthy of your own protection, your own kindness, and your own unconditional love. When a wave of self-doubt hits, it feels incredibly loud and urgent. It feels like absolute truth. But most of the time, that critical inner voice isn't actually yours. It is an echo. It's the echo of an old criticism, a past rejection, or a standard of perfection that was handed to you by a world that didn't know how to see you. When you find yourself thinking, "I can't do this. I'm going to ruin everything," take a step back. Ask yourself, is this a fact happening right now? Or is this just an old record playing in the background? Recognizing that your thoughts are just habits of the mind, not objective reality, creates the breathing room you need to choose a different response. Think about how a real echo works in a canyon. someone screams something into the open air, and seconds later, the mountain throws those exact words back. The sound bounces off the cold stone, growing fainter, but sounding just as real as the original voice. The tragedy of our inner lives is that we have been listening to the echoes of our worst moments for so long that we have mistaken them for our actual identity. We hear the harsh tone of an impatient parent, the cruel rejection of a childhood peer, or the cold indifference of someone we loved deeply. And we assume that voice is coming from our own heart. We absorb their limitations, their fears, and their inability to love us properly. And we turn those things into a script that we read to ourselves every single day. It takes a lot of courage to pause in the middle of an emotional storm and question the validity of your own pain. When you fail at a new task, or when someone looks at you with slight disapproval, that old echo immediately starts playing at full volume. It tells you that you are fundamentally flawed, that you always make a mess of things, and that you will never truly find your footing. In that moment, the feeling of failure is so heavy and suffocating that it feels like the room itself is shrinking. But if you can find just 1 millimeter of space to breathe, you can look at that thought and ask, whose voice is this, really? Is this my own wise, loving heart speaking to me? Or is this the echo of someone who didn't know how to care for my vulnerability? When you look at the actual reality of your present moment, you usually find that the ghost you are fighting isn't even in the room. Reality is the quiet chair you are sitting in right now. Reality is the fact that you have survived every single difficult day you have ever faced. Reality is that you are a person who is trying their best, even when it feels messy. The echo tells you that a single setback means your entire life is over. But reality tells you that a setback is just a single sentence in a very long, beautiful book that you are still writing. By separating the past from the present, you stop letting people who are no longer in your life dictate how you feel about yourself today. This practice of distinguishing the echo from the reality is a daily, sometimes hourly, commitment. It means that when the panic rises, you don't automatically jump into the driver's seat with it. You let the feeling wash over you without letting it define who you are. You look at the critical thought and you say, I hear you, but you don't belong to me anymore. You are just a habit of my mind, a remnant of an old defense mechanism that I don't need. As you gently but firmly reject these ancient scripts, the echoes start to lose their power. The sound gets fainter. The canyon gets quieter. And you finally begin to hear the true, steady cadence of your own authentic voice, a voice that has always been rooted in your goodness, your resilience, and your absolute right to be here. You don't become your own safe place overnight through a single, massive realization. It happens through a series of tiny, daily alliances with yourself. It's choosing to rest when your body tells you it's tired, instead of forcing yourself through another hour of productivity. It's letting yourself say no to an invitation without spending the rest of the night feeling guilty. It's allowing yourself to change your mind about a hobby a goal, or a preference simply because it no longer fits who you are today. Every time you honor a small internal boundary, you send a signal to your system that you are trustworthy. You are showing yourself that your needs matter, one quiet choice at a time. We often make the mistake of waiting for a grand gesture to fix our broken relationship with ourselves. We think that if we take a massive vacation, buy something expensive, or make a sweeping declaration of self-love, the self-doubt will suddenly vanish. But real trust isn't built in the moments when the sun is shining and everything is easy. It is built in the hidden, ordinary interactions you have with yourself throughout the day. Think about how you build trust with another person. It doesn't happen because they threw you a big party once. It happens because they showed up when they said they would. They listened when you were upset, and they didn't judge you when you were having a bad day. The same exact rule applies to the relationship you have with your own heart. An alliance with yourself means forming a partnership between your mind and your feelings. For so long, you might have treated your emotions like an inconvenient interruption to your schedule. When sadness or exhaustion showed up, your immediate reaction was likely to push it down, scold yourself for being weak, and find something to distract your mind. But forming a small alliance means pausing in those exact moments. It's the moment you are sitting at your desk and you feel a tightness in your chest. And instead of telling yourself to just toughen up and push through, you stop. You place a hand on your desk, you take a deep breath, and you acknowledge the pressure. You say to yourself, I see that this is a lot right now. We are going to take this one step at a time. These small alliances require you to become fiercely protective of your own energy and peace. It means that when you are already feeling depleted, you don't volunteer for extra tasks just to make sure everyone else thinks highly of you. It means that when you make a simple mistake, like forgetting an item at the grocery store or misplacing your keys, you choose not to use it as an excuse to call yourself stupid. It sounds so small, almost trivial. But the language you use with yourself in those quiet, unwitnessed moments matters immensely. Every single time you choose kindness over criticism, you are laying down a brick. You are building a foundation of internal safety that can eventually hold the weight of your biggest fears. Think of it as learning to become a supportive companion to yourself. When you walk into a crowded room or step into an unfamiliar situation, you are no longer entering it alone. You are walking in with the deep, quiet assurance that you have your own back. If you stumble over your words, you know that you won't spend the drive home punishing yourself for it. If you feel overwhelmed and need to step outside for some fresh air, you will let yourself do that without feeling like a failure. This is how the grip of self-doubt finally begins to loosen. It dissolves under the weight of 1,000 tiny choices to be kind, to be patient, and to stay on your own side. You begin to realize that you don't need the world to protect you, because you have finally become an ally to yourself. We spend so much energy trying to curate ourselves, keeping the presentable pieces on display while locking the messy pieces in the basement. This internal division is exactly what feeds our self-doubt, because we live in constant fear of being exposed. Carl Jung captured this perfectly when he wrote, "I would rather be whole than good." To be whole means to stop partitioning your life. It means accepting that you can be both strong and fragile, both wise and still learning, both deeply capable and occasionally overwhelmed. When you give up the exhausting task of trying to be purely good or perfect, you finally give yourself permission to exist completely. Think about how much effort it takes to constantly manage your image, ensuring that nobody sees the cracks in your surface. You only show the world your achievements, your calm demeanor, and your ability to handle everything without complaining. But what happens to the rest of you? What happens to the part of you that is terrified of making a mistake? The part that still feels deeply hurt by an old betrayal? Or the part that simply wants to drop everything and cry? When you hide those pieces away because you think they make you unlovable, you create a deep, painful fracture inside your own heart. You end up feeling like an imposter, believing that if people truly knew everything about you, they would walk away. But true peace doesn't come from fixing all your broken pieces until you look like a flawless statue. It comes from gathering up all those scattered, hidden fragments of your story and realizing they all belong to you. Integration is the act of sitting down with your entire history and refusing to cast any part of it out. It is looking at the versions of yourself that you aren't proud of, the version that stayed too long in a toxic situation, the version that let people cross your boundaries, or the version that lashed out because the pain was too heavy to carry, and meeting them with immense mercy. Those versions of you weren't evil. They were just trying to navigate a world they didn't fully understand, yet with the tools they had at the time. When you choose wholeness over perfection, you stop fighting an endless civil war within your own mind. You allow opposite truths to live inside you at the exact same time. You can be an incredibly accomplished person who still feels intimidated by a new challenge. You can be a deeply loving partner who still needs space and time alone. You can be a beacon of support for your loved ones while needing a shoulder to lean on yourself. These complexities do not make you a hypocrite. They make you a whole human being. The self-doubt dissolves when there is no longer a hidden secret inside you that you are trying to protect from the light. Imagine the relief of finally dropping the script. Imagine walking into a room and not needing to prove that you have it all together. You are just you, a beautiful, complicated tapestry of light and shadow, strength and vulnerability. When you integrate your whole self, you create an unshakable sense of safety because you are no longer participating in your own rejection. You are no longer waiting for someone else to accept you before you deem yourself worthy of existing. You look at your scars, your beauty, your doubts, and your wisdom, and you welcome them all home. You are finally complete, just as you are. Even as you build this inner sanctuary, there will still be days when the old doubts return with a vengeance. You might take a risk on a new creative project, try a new routine, or step into an unfamiliar environment, and suddenly find yourself flooded with the familiar panic of not being enough. That is not a sign of failure. It is just a sign that you are pushing past your old comfort zones. In those moments, the goal isn't to magically banish the doubt. The goal is to sit with it, to breathe through it, and to remind yourself that a difficult feeling is not a permanent state of being. You learn to tell yourself, I feel overwhelmed right now, but I am still safe, and this will pass. We often make the mistake of believing that once we start healing, our inner world should always be completely calm. We expect our minds to be a still, undisturbed lake. And the moment a storm rolls in, we panic. We think, I thought I was past this. I thought I did the work. Why am I back here again? But growth is not a straight line that carries you further and further away from pain until you never feel it again. Growth is a spiral. Sometimes you find yourself circling back to the exact same fears, the exact same heavy sadness, or the exact same suffocating worry that you thought you had outgrown months ago. But you are not back at square one. You are meeting the old storm with a completely new level of awareness, strength, and tenderness. Think about what happens when an actual storm passes over a house. The wind rattles the windows, the rain beats against the roof, and for a few hours, the sky turns completely dark. But the house doesn't panic. The house doesn't look at the rain and assume that the sun has vanished from the universe forever. The house just stands there, holding space, waiting for the weather to break. When a storm of self-doubt rises up inside you, you have to learn to become the house. You have to learn to sit still amidst the noise of your own anxious thoughts. When your mind starts screaming that you are a failure or that you are going to lose everything, you don't have to argue with the wind. You just have to remember that a thought is not a fact, and a feeling is not a life sentence. The next time the emotional weather shifts and the panic begins to rise in your chest, try to change your reaction. Instead of fighting the current or frantically trying to figure out how to fix it, just let it rain. Let yourself feel the discomfort without judging yourself for having a hard day. Sit down, place your feet flat on the floor, and anchor yourself in the physical reality of the room. Remind yourself that you have survived every single internal storm that has ever come before this one. None of them lasted forever. Every single one of them eventually ran out of rain. And this one will too. This is what it truly means to weather the storm inside. It's the quiet, resilient choice to stay with yourself when the emotional environment gets rough. It's refusing to abandon your inner sanctuary just because the clouds have gathered. By allowing yourself to be human, to be overwhelmed, and to feel afraid without turning it into a tragedy or a personal failure, you take away the storm's power. You realize that you don't need a guarantee of clear skies to feel secure. You just need to know that you are strong enough, patient enough, and kind enough to sit in the dark with your own heart until the light naturally returns. Being your own safe place means you finally stop looking for external permission slips to validate your existence. You stop expecting a compliment to fix your self-esteem, or a specific achievement to prove your worth. You realize that the validation you were seeking from the world was actually something you needed to give to yourself all along. It is a quiet, unsung kind of freedom. It's the feeling of sitting in your own life, looking around at your choices, your mistakes, and your victories, and realizing that you are finally on your own side. You are no longer waiting to be rescued, because you have already shown up for yourself. Think about how much of your life you have spent living as a guest in other people's expectations. You decorated your choices to suit their tastes. You quieted your voice so you wouldn't disturb their comfort. And you constantly asked for directions to a destination only you could truly find. You traveled so far outside of yourself just to find a sense of belonging, only to realize that the further you walked to please the world, the more empty the house inside became. Coming home to yourself means you finally stop walking away. It means you stand at your own front door, open it wide, and decide that you are going to inhabit every single room of your own life, exactly as you are. It is a deeply emotional moment when you realize that the person you were searching for in every crowded room, in every text message, and in every piece of praise was actually just you. It's the moment you stop treating your own heart like a waiting room and start treating it like a sanctuary. You begin to notice the small, beautiful shifts in your daily life. You notice this, that when you wake up, the first thought isn't a checklist of how you need to improve, but a quiet acknowledgement of your own presence. You find yourself sitting in a quiet room, looking at your hands, and feeling a sudden, overwhelming wave of gratitude for the sheer resilience of your own spirit. You survived the years of self-doubt. You survived the cold seasons of second-guessing. You held your own hand through the dark, even when you didn't know if you would ever see the light. This homecoming doesn't mean your life becomes perfectly neat or free from sorrow. It just means you finally have a solid place to stand when the world gets shaky. When someone misunderstands you, it hurts, but it no longer destroys your identity. When a plan falls through, it disappoints you, but it no longer makes you feel worthless. You have developed a deep, unshakable root system that goes far beneath the surface of daily events. You know who you are. You know what you have been through. You know the depth of your kindness, and you know the boundaries of your peace. You no longer need the world to applaud you to know that your existence has value. Imagine the absolute relief of finally calling a truce with the person in the mirror. You look at your reflections, your lines, your tired eyes, and your soft smiles, and you don't see a list of things to fix anymore. You see a beautiful, living history of survival, love, and growth. You look at your past self with tears of gratitude, thanking that younger version of you for carrying the heavy armor for as long as they had to, until you were strong enough to put it down. You are finally home. You can take off your shoes, let your shoulders drop, and unpack the heavy bags you've been carrying for years. You are safe. You are whole. And you are finally, beautifully, on your own side. We often think that healing will look like a grand finale. We wait for a moment where the clouds part, music plays, and we walk out into the world completely transformed, never to doubt ourselves again. But the truth is, coming home to yourself is much quieter than that. It is found in the ordinary spaces of a regular afternoon. It's the moment you make a mistake, and your first instinct is to breathe out rather than brace yourself. It's the feeling of sitting in a quiet room, entirely alone, and realizing that you don't feel the need to escape your own mind. The static has cleared. The old battlefields have grown over with grass, and there is finally room to breathe. You have spent a lifetime protecting yourself from the world, but the greatest journey you will ever take is learning to protect yourself from your own cruelty. By choosing wholeness over perfection, by learning to recognize the old echoes, and by forming those tiny, daily alliances with your heart, you have built something that the world cannot easily tear down. You have built a sanctuary. As you move forward from this moment, remember that you do not need to be flawless to be worthy of peace. You do not need to have the future completely mapped out to walk with your head held high. You are a living, breathing story, one that is allowed to have messy chapters, unexpected pauses, and beautiful, triumphant returns. The next time the world feels loud and the doubts whisper that you aren't enough, just place a hand over your heart, feel the steady rhythm of your own life, and remember where you belong. You are no longer searching for a safe place to land. You have already become it.